I know this is always nerve-wracking. I hate...
Nah, it's all right.
You're way more adept to it than I am.
I'm not the one running for office. Of course, it's nice to be unopposed. It's a politician's favorite words, right?
I've heard that a few times. Are we good? Well, thank you, Mr. Wood. This is going to be fun. We'll have a quick conversation here for the Tallmadge taxpayers and see if we can get them on board with the levy. Because I think most of them are, but I'm sure there's a few holdouts like, why do we really need this money? And so we're glad to have you in here today. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure. I think it's a great conversation. I think it's one of those conversations we don't have often enough in Tallmadge, but with the way the levies are structured, it's kind of a conversation that comes up every, 5 to 7 years. And it'd be better, I think, for everyone to normalize the conversation.
Yep.
And because I believe the more people that really understand the way taxation is done in the state of Ohio, the smarter all of us can be about how we run our schools. So I'm happy to have the conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, let's first talk about the general taxation here in Ohio versus other states and how that affects us as taxpayers.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I think first things first. So about in Tallmadge, right now, about 60% of the cost of the district are financed by the local taxpayer. 40% are covered by the state and federal government.
Okay.
So it's 60%. So let's talk about that 60%.
Sure. So
what I really like about the way Ohio does their school funding is the taxpayer does have a voice. So anytime the school district needs new money, new resources to cover cost, we have to go to the taxpayer and ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
So unlike, for example, the state of Pennsylvania, let's talk about Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, it's really up to the local school board. The state of Pennsylvania each year posts an index for each district. So every district has an index that they're targeting based on enrollment numbers and inflation. And then the local school board, as long as they don't exceed that index, approves a budget.
Wow.
So there really is no voice by the taxpayer. So, each year it goes up a little bit. And I think this year I was looking at the indexes for the state of Pennsylvania, anywhere from 5.5% to over 9% would be a typical index.
So the school board gets to just say, hey, we need 6% more this year. We're just adding that to everybody's bill, and there's no voting, right?
That's right.
That's crazy.
That's right.
Because that's not what we experience here in Ohio at all.
Not at all. So the other end of the continuum is, as you may remember, Chad, I moved here from New Jersey, and I was on a local school board in New Jersey.
This.
And in New Jersey, the way the taxing is done is the local taxpayer votes for the full budget of that school district every year.
Wow.
So, which I think I really like that model. Because then it becomes a conversation every year of the whole community.
Completely agree, yeah.
So every year, there's a budget. Back when I was on the school board, I was about, it's been 15 or 20 years now. It was April. There was always the school election was in April. I think that has since moved in New Jersey, but the model has remained the same.
Sure. Is
every April, the school board would publish the budget that they wanted to have for the next school year, and the local taxpayers voted on it, which was great because then the local taxpayer can look and say, well, what was the budget last year?
Yeah.
Some number. And what's the budget this year? And it's usually a couple percentage increase, and that made sense to the local taxpayer. School teacher wages have gone up a little bit. This, inflation just has happened. So it's an easy decision to make.
Annually, compared to our 5 to 7 plan, trying to guess what we're going to do. I mean, oh my goodness, I've seen the treasurer's, budget statements and the 5-year forecast. He does an amazing job at it, but he really has to play the numbers to make sure he falls within the amount of money that they've got, compared to just saying, hey, this year we need 2%, this year we need 3%, this year we need 1.5%. Wouldn't that be nice?
It would be nice.
Yeah.
And I think, so the best way to describe it, and again, I like Ohio in the fact that the local taxpayer does have a voice.
Of course.
I think that's fantastic. The problem in Ohio is it's just confusing.
Yeah.
And I think the confusion really the core of that confusion is around something called House Bill 920.
Right.
Which was put in place almost 50 years ago now.
Yeah, and 76, I think.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So, fundamentally what House Bill 920 does is there is no mechanism built into our levy and school funding model to keep up with inflation automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike, for example, the city, which is based on an income tax. It's a straight percentage income tax. So each year, in general, people's, salaries go up a little bit.
Yep.
So that the amount of income that the city collects goes up a little bit, and there's a natural process for keeping up with inflation, and therefore the city can keep up with their cost. So, but in Ohio, with House Bill 920, basically it limits a levy to pretty darn close to what it was originally passed to collect. Not in millage, but collect in true dollars.
Yeah.
So in true dollars. So.
And I get it. They were trying to protect the taxpayer. Like once you vote in a levy, it's never going to go up. The problem is it doesn't account for inflation. It doesn't account for salary increases. It doesn't account for our electric and gas costing more.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So that's the thing, and then it just becomes confusing for folks. So we put together a little slideshow here to try to help folks understand what that means and how that works. So this is just a real simple slide that shows
costs.
School cost from early 70s to today, 50 years worth of cost. So back in 1973, the average teacher salary was less than $10,000
Wow.
a year.
Okay.
So, and today, the average teacher salary in Tallmadge is over $70,000.
Sure.
And I think all of us agree that should be the number one cost of any school district.
Of course.
That's where we want our money going, is into teacher salaries.
Yep.
So how do you keep up with those rising costs over time? So essentially what you have to do is stack levies together to keep up with inflation of costs. So so there is, in Tallmadge, I think there's, we'll get to them here, 8 or 9, 8, I'll count them, let me see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 levies that will stack together here. So
next slide.
Yeah, next slide. So as you can see, costs climb.
Yep.
There's an original before House Bill 920. There was a certain amount of levies collected by Tallmadge City Schools, and then at some point that doesn't cover it anymore. Right.
So we need another one.
You pass another one.
Yep.
In 1985, and then in 1988 we needed more money in order to cover our costs. 1992, so you stack these levies on top of one another in order to keep up with the overall costs.
So then where we are today.
2001, 2009, and then the last one we passed was in 2019.
Yep, so, I remember it well.
Yeah. So that's fundamental to why. I think a common question, and we're hearing it today, and I get it, is folks are saying, hey, my appraised value of my home is going up by 35%. Doesn't that also mean my school tax is going up by that same amount?
Right, but because of House Bill 920, it's not.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
So the term we use is effective millage.
Yeah.
So, for example, let's, back to that, we can go all the way back to 1985. The 1985 levy that was passed, originally that was passed at 8.5 mils.
Okay.
But of course, since 1985, house values have climbed. So what's happened is house values have climbed, the millage rate, or the rate in which that tax was collected, has fallen to really keep the amount collected nearly the same. So now, today, that 8.5% or 8.5 mil levy is only being collected at 3.3 mils.
Wow.
That's the effective millage. So all those levies originally passed at a certain millage rate. That millage rate falls to keep the dollar amount the same, and that's the term effective millage. So if you stack all those, Mr. Hostetler, our treasurer, shared with me all those levies that we've had that we showed in the previous slide. Is about 73 mills is what was originally passed. They are today being collected at 39 mills.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's the effective millage.
Okay.
So again, as house values climb, millage falls to keep the dollar amount the same.
That makes sense.
And back to our original point, since the amount collected isn't going up, it's being held solid, you're not able to maintain keep up with inflation, so you need to stack those levies together.
So here in Summit County, our recent reappraisals and everybody's house values went up. It again diluted the millage, and that's where that term comes in.
Well, diluted. Say that again, Chad. I'm sorry.
So if the house values are going up, and so our effective millage now needs to go down because that's what was passed in the last levy. In a way, it dilutes the millage. Is that because I'm hearing that word, and it kind of makes sense now that what you're saying, based on the appraisal values going up and then the millage going down.
Yeah.
Because the dollar amount can't change to the taxpayer.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. To that.
So I think that's probably the wrong word to use.
I think the term that folks get used to is the effective. As long as they understand, like, hey, when I pass this levy, so we have 2 renewals on the ballot right now.
Yeah.
One was most recently passed in 2019. It was a 5-year levy, and basically the district is requesting that be renewed.
Right.
So when that was originally passed, it was passed to be a 7.4 mill levy, 7.4 mill levy.
For 5 years.
For 5 years.
Yep.
So we're asking that to be renewed to continue to cover our costs. And it'll be renewed, and again, the amount that it will collect will be about the same. But of course, house values have jumped substantially,
right?
So the millage rate that
goes down,
will go down.
But the dollars stay the same. And then we have another one for 10 years. Is that right?
The other one is for 10 years, and that's what was originally passed. I believe I'd have to double check with Mr. Hostetler. I think that one has been renewed several times now.
Okay. So it's no new money for the schools. It's just continuing what we have.
Exactly right.
So how much would we lose if these don't pass?
These 2 levies together is about $6 million, which is about 20% of our overall budget.
Wow. Yeah, that would be big. As a school board member, I would not want to be a part of that next year, having to make those decisions with you guys. Yeah. But, okay, so then we've discussed the renewal. Is there anything else that we need to discuss?
Well, no, I think for me, again, kind of... because I think it is important to have this conversation. Yeah. And it gets back to the taxpayer's voice in what we're doing as a district and understanding it. And it is a shame. I get a lot of calls right now. I'm getting a lot of calls like, what is this renewal for? Why are we doing this? And it's a shame in Ohio that it's confusing. Yeah. So I'm really thankful to you, Chad, for doing this video, because I think the more we normalize this conversation, we talk about it, folks understand why we need new levies, and why we need to do renewals, because originally when they're passed, it's basically saying to the taxpayer, hey, folks, we needed some money. We're just asking for it for 5 years, and then 5 years we'll see where we are. If we still need it, we'll ask for renewal. That's the process we're going through now. And then, so I think it's great to have the conversation, and I'm thankful to talk about this now, because we're not asking for new money. Yeah.
So, Mr. Wood, let's talk about if I'm a taxpayer, how do I know the district is being well run?
That's a great question. It kind of gets back to New Jersey. We had that conversation every year, and so I think for the folks of Tallmadge, you look at some key metrics, and one of those, of course, is how we're doing on the report card. we're very strong performance on the report card. What are you hearing about our services we're providing?
I know. Kids? I remember looking at that when I chose to stay here multiple times.
Yep. Enrolled, employed, enlisted. How are we doing in terms of where our kids are going to schools and being a top-notch district that's attractive to families? As you know, Chad, right now in Tallmadge, real estate signs are not staying up very long.
No, they're not.
People are coming to Tallmadge. We're a very attractive community. And then is the district being well run? And I think the metric that if I'm a taxpayer, I want to make sure that the district's efficient and being well run. It's that operating cost per pupil.
I agree. So we've got that slide, and man, I remember the first time I saw this when you did the chamber meeting, and it was just really, eye-opening to say, hey, oh my goodness, look at where Tallmadge is and our efficiency compared to all the other schools nearby. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. And I agree, as a taxpayer, that is like the key metric, are we being efficient? And I think we are.
Are we being efficient? And the other thing I'm looking at, especially, again, it's great to have this conversation now. And we're not asking for new money right now. There are a lot of local districts that are asking for new money right now. Hudson, Aurora, Twinsburg, Springfield, Mogador, all asking for new money. We're not asking for new money.
Wow.
I'd encourage...
Some of those were at the top of that chart, and they're still asking for more new money. And so we're not going to be asking for more money for how long? What's the estimate?
Right now, it looks like, and I would encourage folks to look at the most recent school board meeting. Mr. Hostetler did his 5-year forecast, and he's not forecasting that we'd move into deficit spending till about 2028. So we got 4 or 5 more years probably without needing new money in Tallmadge, which is good news. That could always change with state funding, et cetera. But right now, the state's done some great things to put the wind at the taxpayers' back. So we're at a good spot in Tallmadge, and look forward to continuing to improve our programs, serving our kids in better ways while being respectful to the taxpayer.
I agree. Well, thank you so much. Thanks again for coming in. This is great. I really appreciate it. And hopefully everybody back home renews issues 10 and 11. We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Chad.